And we are live again. This is Toni Weel on another beautiful Thursday at noon or a little afternoon. And we have Sarah with us from Virtuous Unicorns, and we have that Cheatham? No, Chatham. Well, you can tell me later that how I actually should pronounce this. I gotta tell you, we have some weird noises around the house right now because we have a very, very strong wind. And the funny thing is, I have a big, oh yeah, pretty big black walnut tree. And those walnuts are falling off on my office was the sunroom, and it has like a metal roof, and constantly hear these things falling on the roof, these walnuts, and there is nothing I can do about it. So my kitties are not scared anymore, but they were freaking out before, like, who the heck is knocking on our roof?
Well, Tony, if you don't mind me asking, you don't have to say the city where you live if you want to keep that disclosed, but what state are you in?
I'm in Florida. I'm in
Well,
Central Florida.
that's very interesting. I know you're in Eastern time zone because I'm in Central time zone and I'm in Central Alabama, and it's real windy over here too. So I was just thinking it may be, like moving eastward or something. I'm
Yeah,
not.
it's when I saw this little map on YouTube from this weather guy, and he has this tornado icon all over well, parts of Alabama, southern Georgia, and Florida. And my husband is on the road right now, and he's quite a ways away, and he was like, "Oh my God, the wind is blowing, and there's no rain." I mean, they expect rain tomorrow, but I love it. I love a good breeze, as long as there are no damages, I'm fine with it. I love a good storm, thunder and rain, and it was actually the kind of weather that we used to in the Netherlands, go walk the dogs, rain or shine. So yeah, it's interesting weather. Anyway, I invited that today again for well, again. I love listening to him and talking with him because he has a wealth of information, is a great researcher, and can go into detail very, very well. And he put this PDF together that I talked about last week. And that was all about the GI tract. And I know so many people have problems, and we all think they're normal. They go from constipation to hearing that you have polyps. People doing enemas once in a while. People doing enemas a few times a week, or even several times a day, to colonics, and then the hospital wants you, or your doctor wants you to have a colonoscopy like every 6 months, and I'm like, oh, stop, 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 because there is so much going on, and we kind of ignore it in a way. Yeah, if it bothers us, if we got a bellyache, and but at sometimes, it's getting kind of too late, and I hear of young people with colon cancer, and there is, we have to learn about what the GI tract is. And I mentioned in the title, like the GI tract in all its glory, but it goes to one end completely, from one end to the other end, and it's a big part of your body. If you
30
see
feet.
all, yeah, if you see all these people, and you see it actually more in men than in with women, is these big bellies. And I already learned when I was in my young adult. There was a book, and the book was about going back to nature. It was in Dutch, and it was actually talking about milk and dairy, and why we would have these big bellies. So it's been known for quite some time. It's nothing new. I mean, there was junk food or the wrong foods for us way back in the 60s. But I gotta say, until the 70s even, it was rare to see it. Now it is so common, and there is so much wrong in our guts. So I have to apply to that for even putting that PDF together. And I did share it with a few people who asked me to send it. But he's going to make it even more clear about what is going on, and especially, and we can do a screen share so everybody can see it, the difference between an unhealthy colon and a healthy colon. And it's like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to see how mine would look. And I've been a pretty healthy eater most of my life, with the here and there, the junk foods. But there was in that PDF that there was one part in, oh, I didn't number the pages. I should have done that. But you actually have a what is it, an image that goes into the relation of parts in your GI tract, your colon, with other sections in your body. And I would love to give it completely over to you. You know what it is about, and yeah, what is your take on all of these things? Shall we do a screen share? Do you want to share your screen? What shall we do?
Yeah, we can do a combination of all of that, and I really love the capability of the Zoom presentation because of the ability to share your screen. I really got into it when there was a World Energy Conference that they had last year in all the social medias, and one of the ladies that was hosting it, she was from England, and she invited a lot of different people that were into those types of communities and fields, and she had heard about me doing iridology, and she thought that would be an interesting topic for me to give a presentation on. And so I put one together roughly that I wanted to give on iridology, and I enjoyed it so much. And I was watching other people give presentations on Zoom through a PDF presentation, and how professional theirs looked by the way they put the PowerPoint together and everything. And it really inspired me to make one even better, using these PDF presentation makers we have either on MacBook or, Windows, and I have a MacBook, so I'm just going through the learning curve of learning how to use it, and it's just taking a while because if you hit the wrong button, it sometimes messes you up, and then you got to figure out what you did. And, it's sometimes quite technical. And, but that's what has inspired me to want to follow this form of presentation throughout using many different topics, because I would like to eventually, all the different Facebook posts that I've made on interesting topics just to grab people's attention and to just share great information with people, because that's what you have to do this day and age to get people's attention, is you have to talk about subjects that really grab their attention, and because we're living such, busy, chaotic lives. And so I would like to eventually do that with all of my posts that I've made, and then other even future topics, because it's just, I really think it's nice how you can add all the different graphics in there, and you can change the fonts. You can do a lot more on there in a PDF than you can just on a normal Facebook post. And that's what's so nice about it, But yeah, I will share my screen, and then I will show you how all of it came about. Excuse my desktop, because sometimes it's a never ending battle trying to keep it all organized, with all my iPhotos and different, folders and stuff. But I'll show you what I was going to first share with you, is how I was inspired to talk about the bowel so much. It was because my parents have had a health food store, this is their 18th year that they've had it. And when we bought the health food store in 2005, there were several of these old books from the 60s and 70s that this lady had that we inherited when we got the store, because she didn't want them anymore. And this was one of the books that we inherited. And that was my first introduction to how much Dr. Jensen really talked about the importance of the of tissue cleansing and bowel management and all the interesting and very complex things that he went into detail talking about. So I got some of my great information out of this book. But then also I found this book that was really amazing and inspiring. And this is the one that talked a lot about the embryonic connection that we have with the development of the embryonic stage of development and the large intestines, and how it really is important in the studying of iridology, and how that's where Dr. Jensen connected the state of the colon with the state of how iridology is so important, and how we can read the iris and we can see the correlation between the state of the colon and all of the rest of the weaknesses in the body in the iris. And it's just very, very fascinating, and so that's what I talk about a lot in my PDF that I made up about iridology. And this is the PDF that I created, Toni, that I would like to go into detail when we have a presentation talking about iridology more, because this is the one that I made when I gave my second presentation on iridology. But this is where I went into and I talked about, see, I put all these different photographs and illustrations and charts, and I want to do the same thing when I make up these other PDFs for the other topics, But this is where I talked about from that book, The Guide to Better Bowel Care, about the neural arch, the neural arch or bowel reflex, and it's very interesting. And while we're here, I wanted to read this part to all the listeners and to the people that are viewing it, because this is tying into my article that I wrote. I'm not trying to jump around too much, but I figured since I'm already here, I'll go ahead and talk about this, and then that can show the importance of the other things that I discuss in the PDF. I mean, in the Facebook article that I wrote. But it says, what is the neural arch or the bowel reflex, and how is it connected to our nervous system? To learn, this is from the book right here. This bit of information. See, I have it in quotation. So all of this is from the book. He said, to learn more about the bowel reflex, which I named the neural arch reflex, I began to study embryology. I learned that by the second week of formation, the embryo takes the shape of the primitive gut tube, and its nervous system begins to form. This means that the bowel tissue and the nerve tissue are very intimately related. By the fourth week, buds such as the lung bud and the liver bud begin to bulge out from the gut and nerve tissue. By the sixth week, most of the organ buds begin to form. These organ buds, I suddenly noticed, are covered with a membrane made up of the same tissue that formed the bowel and nerve tissue in the earlier embryo. That was when I realized that the tissue of the primitive gut surrounds each organ with a membrane. All of a sudden it came to me. This is how the genetic weaknesses of the mother and father are passed down to the children through the gut and nerve tissue that become the membrane covering the organs. Where the bowel has an inherited weakness, the organ that developed from that area of the bowel also has an inherited weakness that is connected to that part of the colon. This is the key to the neural arch syndrome. I could now see how certain areas of the bowel were reflexly related to specific organs. Any genetic weakness in the bowel could affect the performance of the organ associated with that part of the bowel. Toxicity or nutrient depletion in one would affect the other. This makes that part of the bowel and that organ more subject to breakdown and consecutively to diseases. Dr. Jensen. And see, this is the photograph he had in his book that I copied and put in here in the PDF. And it shows these are the buds that are budding out from the primitive gut tube. This black little inside area. See if I zoom in here. Zoom in right here. This black area, that's the primitive gut tube. And these are all the heart bud, liver bud, if you guys can see it, and the leg bud. And those are what he's talking about when he was saying that before. And then this is another chart from one of his other books called the Doctor Patient Handbook. And he shows how all these different areas are so very amazingly connected. And I see it all the time in iridology. And that's why I love iridology so much, is that especially in these flexure areas, this is called the splenic flexure. This is called the hepatic flexure. Or no, I got it backwards. I have a tendency to do that. The one on the right side of our body is always the hepatic, and the one on the left is the splenic. That's why I get them mixed up sometimes. But it's very ironic how when we have a genetic weakness in there, and then we start eating the wrong types of foods like dairy products, how that starts to get congested in that bend of the large intestines. And then it starts to cause children from a young age to have, ear problems, and they have to get tubes in their ears. Because look right there, it's the ear and the mastoid. The mastoid is the plate, the bone behind the ear. That's in the bone behind the ear in the skull. That's the mastoid. And then there's the medulla, and then the neck and shoulders. And I can't tell you how many times in iridology I always see people have a genetic weakness or a neural arch weakness in this area of their colon, and it's affecting their neck and shoulders. And they're always like, man, my neck and shoulders always bothers me. And then as soon as I look in their eyes, I'm like, well, there it is. And it's always the right, because the iridology is divided in two, and I mean, of course, I'll go into more of this in detail later when I do talk about iridology, but it's just really amazing because you can see how it all connects. And that's what I pretty much talked a lot about in this presentation. And I explained, with more further charts and illustrations, so we can go into more detail about that sometime, in the future. But going back to our main topic at hand, we're talking about the article that I wrote. And that is what Toni was talking about, is how after I give a little bit of an intro in the article, of course, then I start talking about the different areas of the intestinal system. You have see, it's easier if I do this chart. I just bear with me while I'm bouncing around a little bit, because I have some things still scattered together that I'm trying to put together. See, here was what I had already tried or had been working on today. But here's the whole diagram of the whole the 30 feet long tube that we have from our mouth to our anus. It starts up here in the mouth when you got the tongue and the sublingual gland. That's the gland between your jaw that helps you to absorb several of your, because they say, digestion and some of your absorption starts in your mouth, and that's the sublingual gland. That's why we take certain supplements sublingually. That's the whole principle of that process. But then it goes from the mouth and down the esophagus, and then it goes through the esophagus, and it goes into the small intestines. Or no, it goes into the stomach, and then it goes into the small intestines. And then you can see these areas where it says, see, there's the hepatic flexure. Well, first it starts down here at the cecum, and then there's where the ileocecal valve comes in. That's very important. That's why I talked about that in the Facebook post. And then it goes up the ascending colon on your right hand side, and then it goes over your transverse that goes underneath your stomach and and these other organs. And then it goes down the other side. That's your descending. And then down here is your sigmoid and your rectum, and then your anus. And so that's the whole complete chart of it. And then this is what we had talked about before, about how when you see damage in the large intestines, and this was what Dr. Jensen had in one of his iridology books, how he showed some of the main symptoms that we get in the large intestines. See, this is a normal colon, pretty much what a normal colon looks like. This is prolapsing, where the transverse colon is prolapsing, and we can see that again in iridology. And then this is severe prolapsing, where it's smashing the organs, even the reproductive organs in the woman, the bladder. It can start pushing. And the older we get, because the effects of gravity, then it's pushing down on us. That's also one of the contributing factors why we start, one of the contributing factors, not the only factor, that we start getting saggy skin and things like that too, is and that's why it's also important to, not only support our parathyroid and connective tissue, but also do inversion, like reverse the effects of gravity by going upside down sometimes when you are able to, if you don't have issues of vertigo or dizziness or just issues like that can make you feel, sick when you go upside down, because there for longest time, I couldn't even go upside down myself as well, or I'd get sick feeling, But then there's a spasm, or it starts to create a stincture. A stincture is where, that's what it's showing you right here. It may not be zoomed in enough, and I don't know how to do it in this part of the photograph, but it's where the large intestines closes in, and that's what they call a stincture. And you can also see that in iridology, because this was, again, a page out of Dr. Jensen's Volume 2 Iridology book. And this is a balloon sigmoid, where the sigmoid's gotten larger than normal. And remember, for everyone that doesn't know, they estimate that your large intestines is the size of your wrist. That's what it's supposed to be the size of. So the normal size. Now, of course, it can get ballooned and it can get smaller than that, you know. And then you have diverticulum, or polyps, or the little they call them, just little pockets of trash. That's what they're called, many different names, but it's caused from like constipation, caused from put too much pressure we're pushing from having constipation, or too much gas. And then you have colitis, where you have a combination of several of these different things, and then you start having Crohn's and ulcerative colitis and all kind of other different symptoms of bowel inflammation, that's going on. But okay, so that's explaining more or less what the differences are. And so now we'll just go back to this to my article that I wrote on Facebook, and that I'm trying to make into a PDF. And the reason why I wanted to show the full chart is that this doesn't show the esophagus and the mouth. It just shows the other areas, of course, and it doesn't show the hepatic and the splenic. It doesn't go into as much detail, so that's why I was telling Toni I wanted to update some of these charts, and I want to update some of the information, because when I originally first created this post, I did it in 2018, and then I've kept sharing it over the years, because I've had several people that appreciated that I put it all together, and I had several people said that they had to go back and read it in segments, because it is kind of long. But anyways, I'd start off at the very beginning, and I just explain how there's certain types of foods that really affect our bowels that are very common in our normal standard American lifestyle, and that's dairy, eggs, flours, and salt and MSG. And I left out one that I want to go back and add, that when I was reading over this, because that's what way it always happens when that's why you have to periodically update your work, is I forgot sugar, refined sugar. That's all salt, fat, sugar, and flours. That's all those make up the combination that makes up fast food. And that's what I said there. That's why fast food is so highly addictive, is because they use the most highly addictive substances to get you hooked. But also it's because it feeds candida and yeast, because those foods ferment the easiest as well, because they've been so highly processed. And that's kind of what I go into talking about all of this, and that's what creates a lot of, these colonies of bacteria, because again, we are more bacteria than we are human. And so those bacteria, they're trying to clean up this waste. They're creating their own biofilms, because they have to eat and then process it and then poop out the waste. And so that's what they call biofilms. And that only creates more of a problem, going on in our GI tract. And they say the more times that we eat foods that create residue and greasiness, it creates another layer upon layer upon layers. And that's why they say, as we're detoxing, we're kind of like we're trying to peel back the layers of an onion. We're trying to get to that, deep inside cleanliness layer that's there, and especially with the small intestines and the large intestines, but especially the small intestines, because we have to get all that buildup off the walls in order to have proper absorption. Because the villi, the hairs that are on the wall of the small intestines, if they're smashed with the buildup of all these starches and flours and just build up and grease and all these processed foods and things, and then it's making it where we're not absorbing our nutrients, because the villi are supposed to be suspended in water. That's why water-rich foods are the number one food of the humankind, because that's what the digestive system is designed to process and eat. because not only does the villi need to be suspended in water to let the nutrients go in between them so that they can be so we can absorb them, but also it's because our digestive system was designed to eat living water rich foods, that has the proper makeup of fiber and natural components, in its natural form, not been heated and altered and processed. And then also when we add in those things that were never designed to be put into our bodies, like all these processed oils and dairy and all those products that our body reacts to it very negatively, because it was something we're putting in our body that was never designed. Our bodies were never designed to put that in there. But so then that's as we get in there and we start breaking all that up, then we have to remember, as Dr. Morse has taught, as well as many of these other people talk about cleanliness of the bowel, is that we're not only trying to clean up the inside area where all the waste builds up, but we're trying to clean the inside of the wall of these intestines as well. Because that's what it can do, just like an artery in our circulatory system, or our arteries, it can build up in the wall of these organs as well as in the area where the waste flows or the blood flows. So that's why it's important to use the herbs and to just keep on working on astringent fruits and the herbs again that help pull that toxicity out of the wall of the organ as well as the areas where it builds up. And then it gets trapped in all those little folds, all the crevices, the folds, the cracks, and so, but yeah, getting to where Toni was talking about it, I was again. Then I went on and I said, uh, yeah, this is the reason why people have years and years of buildup in their colon and it's very hard to get out. While I read that, it made me remember that there's several famous people in the world like Elvis and John Wayne that supposedly they had over 25 pounds of fecal matter built up in their colon, because John Wayne supposedly had colon cancer, and then Elvis had some kind of issues like that too, because he was on lots of pain medicine supposedly and different things, but they say that both of those people had lots of buildup in their colon. And I found it very ironic, because I was in the grocery store one night and I seen a cookbook that said all of John Wayne's favorite what did it say, like Western cooking, like cooking dishes, like, and I was like, well, no wonder if he ate majority of those real rich, grilled foods that they ate out on the wagon trail, in the West back then that's one reason why he had the colon problems, because majority of those were meat products and the foods that they cooked from starches and grains and things that they would have out there on the wagon trail in the West. But yeah, that's so it's just ironic when you can see how everything connects, like that. But then I go on and I talk about, like, see, antibiotics and other sulfur-based products, they create other buildup in the intestines, because of the sulfur. And we see that all the time in iridology. And then I talk about how the fungus and the parasites come in and they contribute to all of that. That's what I was talking about earlier. When the walls of the colon are coated with layers of this sticky, gooey plaque, they become a breeding ground for fungus and parasites, especially candida. The population has become overgrown and they produce toxic waste byproducts called biofilm. And see, the idea is we want to have 80% beneficial bacteria and only 20% of the candida. We don't want to get rid of candida all the way, because that's part of our cleaning bacteria that's there to clean up this waste. It's just when we're exposed so much as a society of people to these sterilizing agents, these chemicals and sterilizing agents, that so many of the normal society has been brainwashed into thinking that we need for viruses and bacterias and all these pathogens that are in the environment, then it creates an imbalance. And then it makes it where we have to do a candida cleanse, because when you have an imbalance, you have way too much candida instead of beneficial bacteria. And so you have to do a cleanse, because you only have so much room for the bacteria to grow back that's beneficial. So you have to cleanse the bad bacteria or the cleaning type of bacteria down, so then the beneficial bacteria will come back. Well, that means we have to be strict in our approach on how we eat, so that the foods that we eat that bacteria doesn't like, because the bacteria wants you to keep eating the things that they feed off of, the candida and the yeast. They don't want you to eat fruits and vegetables and things like that because that's what they don't thrive in that environment. So the more we eat clean foods, it naturally helps the bacteria microbiome to balance out. That's why Dr. Morse has talked about many times over the years that probiotics are really not necessary for the majority of the population. There's only a few certain special cases that I've heard them say, and like Marcy that used to work for Dr. Morris, and I've talked with them before about it. And there's only certain cases where people are on immune suppressant drugs and immune suppressant things for like if they've had organ transplants or just different cases where they've had to be on a lot of those drugs for a long time, then they might need to take a probiotic for temporarily, because that's better than than them. Because like I helped a client one time that she was like that. She had only one kidney, and her only kidney she had was a transplant, and she said that she kept having to go to the hospital because she kept having sepsis and infections. And she kept having to, get antibiotics. And I told her, I said, well, we need to get your good bacteria levels up high enough as at the same time while you're eating a clean diet and do that temporarily so you don't have to keep going back to the doctor because you're having sepsis. And so in that case, the probiotics and the natural sterilizing agents that are natural, like the herbs, like olive leaf extract, oregano. There's a lot of different natural herbs you can use that are natural antibiotics that you don't have to use antibiotics. And so when I told her about all those natural things she could do, it kept her from having to go back to the doctor every so many months to get, treated for sepsis. So that's what I'm saying. We have to look at every case individually and how to approach it. But the majority of the people, the more they stick to a clean diet that only creates an internal terrain that beneficial bacteria thrive in, then you're going to have more beneficial bacteria. But if you eat a predominantly diet that creates a terrain inside your body that candida, yeast, and bacteria, that's that type of bacteria that feeds off of that, then that's what you're going to predominantly have. And then on top of that, when you consider that the majority of the world uses antibacterial soap, hand sanitizer, bleach, Lysol, all of these things that over sterilize us in many different ways. I mean, I see it all every day, and I help my parents with the health food store. I have people, they're like, well, I don't use bleach, but to put it on my clothes when I wash my clothes. And I'm like, well, you breathe in the vapors when you're pouring it in there. And then when the clothes are rubbing on your skin all day, that's still affecting your largest organ in your body, your skin, So there's just a lot of these things that people don't always, look at, of course. But anyways, going on, this is where I start breaking it down, like Toni was talking about. I go into talking about, like, I start with the mouth. Digestion starts in the mouth, talking about how we need to chew the food properly, because the majority of people don't chew the food enough times, because we're in a hurry, or we've just gotten in the habit of eating too fast. Because when we're hungry or we have a really delicious food, the faster we can eat it, the more we can eat it, because if you eat it slower and you chew more, then you're gonna be satiated faster. You're gonna fill up quicker, and so that's another reason why we've gotten in the habit of eating too fast and not chewing enough, because some of your healthy foods that are really fibrous, sometimes you have to chew 10, 20 times each bite because of how fibrous the foods are. I mean, it's really more than what a lot of people realize. A lot of people only chew like 2 to 3 to 5 times each bite, and then they swallow it. And it's a lot of times not good enough for people, especially for people that have weak digestive systems. And they don't have the proper enzymes, from their pancreas. Their pancreas isn't producing enough enzymes, and they're not eating enough plant-based foods that naturally have enzymes. So their digestive power is low, in their body. But yeah, and then also I went on here and I was talking about we also don't do proper food combining. We mix the foods in properly together when we eat them as well, because we like to overcomplicate things. We like to mix way too many ingredients together, even when we eat our raw foods. And I know there's certain times we need to, have a celebration and eat a complex salad or eat a complex raw food creation that we make sometimes, but generally speaking, the easier, the more simple you can eat, the better it will be for your body and its ability to digest and process that food, you know. But then I go on and then I talk about the stomach, you know, talking about how the stomach has been affected from all the chemicals, like the GMOs, and how it can create leaky gut syndrome, and it can weaken the proper amounts of stomach acids. You know, that's a very big one. I see that all the time in my parents' health food store. You know, people don't have enough stomach acid to even digest their food properly. So they have to take betaine hydrochloric acid, you know, and that's also because they won't change their diet, you know, and so again, that's kind of like a band-aid. It's a supplement, but it's ironic that especially for people with heartburn and indigestion, that the medical association wants you to think you don't have enough stomach acid. I mean, that you have too much stomach acid, when really the irony is it's the opposite. But they give you medicines that shut down your proton pump. And you know, they're called proton pump inhibitors. Well, that's shutting down your acid pumps, making it where not only are you not digesting it enough already, but you're digesting it completely not at all after taking the medications. And then you have undigested food going through your intestines. And then you can't absorb it. You can't utilize those nutrients because you didn't break it down properly. So it makes people start to have a lot of problems. And then we see people come in the store after they've been on those antacids, you know, like Prilosec and all those different ones, and they talk about having intestinal pains, you know, and did you know that here's another tidbit of information about the intestines, is that the intestines don't have any nerve endings. So you can't feel actually pain in the intestines themselves. The pain has to get so bad that it has to radiate out to the tissue that's around the intestines for you to really know that something's bad. So what I mean by that is that it has to get really inflamed. That's why certain people can have the early signs of ulcerative colitis or Crohn's for many years, and they don't realize it at first, you know, because they can't feel how bad it's really getting, you know, until it gets really bad, you know. And so it's just about researching these different conditions, the different causes, and you have to look to this alternative information that's out there from a lot of these old books and pioneers that wrote about these things before the medical association came on board, you know. And so that's why it just takes a lot of research with these things sometimes, you know. But then that's what I go on here and I was talking about, you know, see, acid reflux is not because you have too much stomach acid, or yeah, it's not because you have too much. See, that's a typo. I need to put too much stomach acid. It's not, it's from having not enough. The opposite of what the AMA wants you to believe, you know. And then it goes on and I talk about the small intestines. And then I talk about the cecum. The cecum is the very first part of the small intestines. Well, actually, the appendix is the first part of the small intestines. And the appendix, while I'm talking about it, it's a bacteria storehouse for the large intestines. Because when the food is coming out of the small intestines into the large intestines, it has a different bacteria residence that are, because it's more liquefied when it's going through the small intestines versus going through the large intestines. And it really actually doesn't become solid until it gets down to the sigmoid. The sigmoid colon, and that's a very interesting story right there when you talk about that, because that's a whole nother, you know, topic when you get down there to that. So let me keep going on so you can hear some of this stuff. Anyways, the cecum, the beginning of the colon, called the cecum, is where you'll find the ileocecal valve, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's distinctive because it's the only site in the gastrointestinal tract that is used for vitamin B12 and bile acid absorption. This is because the mucus lining changes from the small intestines to the large. It's ironic because where does the B12 production of your body come from? Your good bacteria in your large intestines, and also your small intestines, you know. Well, there just happens to be this area at the start of the cecum before the valve is this area of the appendix, which is very important to the bacteria balance of the colon. And see, I wrote in bold words here that for I don't forgot how many hundreds of years, they used to tell the tale that the appendix had no medical purpose, that it was just a leftover, they called it a vestigial organ, like didn't have any function. So when people would start having problems with it, they would just remove it because they'd say, oh, you don't need it anyways, and it's better for us to go ahead and remove it than it to start rupturing, and then we have to remove it in an emergency. But you actually do need it. And there's some people, of course, in your more conspiracy minded people that they know the importance of it. They just don't want you to necessarily always keep it so that you'll become more immune compromised, and then you'll get sick easier, and then it leads to more profits. And it's sad that we have to think that way, but we see it through their behavior and through their actions of what they've shown us over the last 5 years. So I'm not trying to go too much down that rabbit hole, but that ties into what we're talking about, because the appendix is very important. And so you want to do everything you can to keep your bacteria levels in your body balanced and keep your immune system strong, not your your immunity strong, not your immune system, because as Dr. Morse says, we do not have a technical system called the immune system. In anatomy and physiology, there is no system in the body called the immune system. That's a made-up terminology from the AMA that they use to give you what they call an autoimmune disorder. What you have is immunity, natural immunity that comes from your lymphatic system and how clean your lymphatic system and the trillions of bacteria that lives in the lymphatic system as well as lives in the large and small intestines. And that's to keep us immune strong from the bacteria in the environment that we can be exposed to, because there's all different types of bacteria out there. There's even flesh-eating bacteria and all these different ones out there. It's only the ones that are severely immune compromised that have a problem with those. Same thing with staph and a lot of these different bacteria that are out there, because I find it very ironic when you read about staph that how if the person goes to the medical association with staph, they give them over 20 different antibiotics and it doesn't help. The only thing that ends up helping is when they get a fecal transplant. They take a capsule with someone's poo in the capsule that is loaded full of good bacteria, and then it stops them from having severe diarrhea and from throwing up. And because that's why they say C. diff can be so dangerous, is because they can start to become dehydrated, and that's why that a lot of these people have resulted to having to look outside of what the medical association is doing for them, because it's not working, because they're actually trying to go against nature. Antibiotic means against life. Probiotic means for life. So the best probiotics of all are the kind that we produce in our own intestines. But there's not a whole lot of those natural bacteria colonies left because we've been so bombarded with these sterilizing agents for so long. They've even done tests, and some of the only cultures that they still have high numbers in their intestines are some of the tribes that are left in like Africa and some of these rural places where they've never taken antibiotics before. And that's where they're actually doing lots of study on the proper levels of bacteria. I've also read a couple books on the microbiome that was very, very interesting. One was from a doctor. His name was I can show it to you right fast, and then I want to keep going so I don't go over our time. And then I hope I hope it's okay that I'm just, I guess, giving a whole presentation today. I don't want you guys to feel like I'm not giving y'all a chance to talk either.
Well, you are the one who is important and has the information. We just listen.
Okay, all right. Well, let me find right here just a second. Here we go. I wanted to show you this because this is very relative to today, what's going on. These are some of my favorite books, and this was the book I was talking about. It's called Missing Microbes from Martin J. Blasser. That was an amazing book. If any of you guys want to read a really good book on understanding the microbiome of the body, and this was from Martin J. Blasser, was the head of the Microbiome Institute for a long time too. And that was really amazing book. I got a lot of really great information. And one of the best quotes I took away from that book was he said, you should never take an antibiotic unless it's for a life-threatening condition. He said you need to ask the doctor when he wants to prescribe you that antibiotic, if I don't take this antibiotic, am I going to die? Because he said 80% of what they prescribe antibiotics for are not for life-threatening conditions because they just give them to you for all kind of things today, like sinus infections or, ear problems or teeth problems, just all kind of different things when a lot of times they're not always necessary. Now, I understand sometimes with teeth challenges because, we don't want to get our tooth so abscessed that we lose it. There's certain situations where you might have to take the antibiotic, but I'm saying generally speaking, like he said, it's better to only take them when in emergency cases, because he said another thing he said taking an antibiotic to a person taking an antibiotic that's never had the antibiotic before is like setting off an atomic bomb in a rainforest, and how you'll never get that pristine environment back. You'll get some of it to grow back, but never like it was before you took the antibiotic, so that's why we need to remember and be aware of what we're doing, by choosing to take these things that they use in society. Because if you also look at the history of antibiotics and penicillin, they only started really using penicillin and all those back in the 1800s when they were still using the bathroom in an outhouse in a privy. Well, that waste from the poo and the pee was getting into the water supply. And that's when they started treating the water with all the sterilizing agents. And they started talking about how, we need penicillin and all these other things because people are getting, all these infections and stuff, So that's the point I'm making is they weren't living according to, again, to with nature. Because, any cultures, even here in central Alabama, they've done studies on the Indian tribes, and they've shown how every so often after the tribe was in one certain area, after they were there long enough, they would move because their waste would build up too much in that area. And so they would naturally move to a whole new area and then recolonize that area. And then they would keep moving periodically to keep that from, the waste from building up too much, And it was just really interesting when you connect all the dots to see how people lived before the modern era where they had all these, medicines and things like that. But okay, and it's just going on. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because that's very important because the appendix is very important for helping the large intestines to function properly. And then it just goes on to talking about the ascending colon, how the ascending colon comes up, on the right hand side, and then it comes up and see. That's another part that I want to put in here is talking about the hepatic flexure, because that's another part that I want to put in here that I discovered and learned about after I created this original post on Facebook, and that how the hepatic flexure was so important for people to be aware of, because it explains why people have problems in the area around their ears, because that's associated with that area of the large intestines, and then the transverse. That's why we've always known, everyone that knows about iridology always knows that if you got a lot of buildup in your transverse colon, or you got prolapsing, or you got stagnation there, then a lot of times you got sinus problems and sinus congestion and head congestion and tinnitus and memory problems and focusing and attention. And like Dr. Morse says, where did I park the car, honey? Or where's my car keys? Just all these things that we see all the time, and then even the dementia and like I said, Alzheimer's. They've done studies on Alzheimer's, the brains, and they've noticed that the brains of the Alzheimer's patients has a buildup of protein molecules as well as heavy metals, especially aluminum. And they think that buildup again over time is causing the degradation of the brain to the point where they get either severe dementia or Alzheimer's. And what does that tell us when we understand Dr. Morse's teachings? Is that their lymphatic system was stagnant. Their lymphatic system wasn't flowing, and especially their glymphatic system. That's what in the last several years since they discovered that, and Dr. Morse started talking about it for several months there in his videos because, he was excited just like we all were because, that's Dr. Morse's favorite topic, because that's one of the things he's been his mission to bring to the world is the study of the lymphatic system and bring it to more to attention, and so that's one reason why that they're starting to have those problems in the head is because their lymphatic system is not draining properly. Well, it's also because it's all backed up from the bottom down. That's why I've seen it with so many of my clients, and that's why I love talking about this subject, that when you pull the plug on the colon and you start getting that waste draining, then you start seeing the central trunk start to drain. And then you start to see the head starting to drain. I can't remember, Toni. I know we're getting close to our time at the end of the time, but I can't remember if I found it in the fans of Dr. Morse group or if I found it in one of the other groups. But one year I found somebody was sharing this PDF from one of Dr. Morse's old books. And this is what it's called, the Illusion Called Diseases, Volume 1, The Great Lymphatic System. And the reason why I love this little PDF, and I wish Dr. Morse would make this in a full book that we could buy and we could put it in our library. But I'm just still glad that, because it doesn't even say anywhere that it's, written by Dr. Morse, but everyone was sharing and saying that it did come from him. And I was just looking again at the bottom to see if it did give him credit or something for it. But I just assumed it did because everyone was sharing it from his teachings, and it sounds just like his wording. But anyways, there's one certain area that he says something that's very interesting. And I've been so puzzled on why Dr. Morse doesn't talk more about it, today, as he talks about right up here. And let me get back to it. He talks about under this one area, the eliminative organs. And he says, especially if you understand the most cellular waste are acids, putting acids in blood would be a huge no-no. And he goes on, this is what was interesting. He said, first, let me introduce you to your lymphatic system's eliminative organs, the kidneys, the colon, and the skin. So he always talks about the kidneys and the skin, and he doesn't mention the colon enough, and he doesn't explain that that's the third channel. But he goes on here and he says, if these exits are blocked, or too weak to support proper kidney function, then one cellular waste will ooze out any hole your body has. Or worse, they will start to accumulate in the body. First, your lymph nodes swell. That's your body telling you your lymph nodes are getting blocked. And simply put, if your food consumption is too toxic, you'll develop a pocket or encase this trash, creating tumors, boils, cysts, polyps, etc. But then he goes on and he says, your kidneys are the main players in this process of cellular waste removal. And I think because Dr. Morse wants to keep things so simplified, that helps drain the head, and then that helps the master glands start to work better. Because remember what Dr. Morse said just this year in one of his earlier interviews that he gave with one of the individuals that he gave an interview with. He said it one time, and that's the key with Dr. Morse is you have to listen to everything he says, and you have to listen for these little nuggets of information. As he said, the pituitary is the antenna of the hypothalamus. So what does that mean? What's the antenna on the radio good for if the radio doesn't work? So see, that's what Marcy taught us in 2018 when I went to level 2. She had a whole 4 or 5 hour talk on nothing but the hypothalamus and how it helps the pituitary, and how that's why I say that the hypothalamus is kind of like the big brother to the pituitary. And then actually hold on, let me think, let me get it. Just recently, Ivana Koshley, or however you pronounce her name, she did a really cool a video about the teeth. And she was talking about how there's a direct correlation between people that have thyroid weakness, parathyroid weakness, hypothalamus, and pituitary weakness, and how that makes it where it's hard for people to have their teeth be able to recover. And they also start to have a lot more weaknesses with their enamel, and they're getting their teeth to recover when they're doing primarily the fruit-based detoxing, because they have those weaknesses in those areas. And how some of us don't have those weaknesses as bad because we don't have weaknesses in all 3 of those areas. We don't have weaknesses in the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the thyroid, and I've seen it many times. I've seen the correlation. I've seen how people start to have real bad teeth weaknesses, and then when you look at these other areas, they're just as equally weak, and then that shows how they're all connected, But so that's why I like to talk about all of these things, because I love how Dr. Morse, he's trying to keep it simplified for the masses. Well, I like to kind of think about, I want to talk to people that gives them the intermediate to more detailed conversation, you know, and I'm not trying to say I'm trying to do anything better or anything different than what the way Dr. Morse's approach. I mean, I'm trying not to say I'm trying to improve on it or I'm trying to take away from it or talk, you know, anything different about it than I'm just trying to add to it. I'm same thing as all these other people that like Dr. Jensen and all these other great natural healers that work with Dr. Morse's teachings. They don't go against it, and his teachings don't go against theirs necessarily. It works with it, you know, and that's why I like to talk about all these different natural, you know, healers and stuff, you know, and how they work with Dr. Morse's teachings and how Dr. Morse's teachings work with theirs, you know. But then the last thing I wanted to comment about before we're going to finish today is talking about the sigmoid. Is the sigmoid, the reason why that's so important for people to understand is because the sigmoid, like I was mentioning earlier, it helps to eliminate the water in the waste. When the waste goes down from the small intestines through the large intestines, it gets to the sigmoid. The sigmoid dries up all the water and turns it into a solid waste. Okay. Well, why is that so important to talk about? It's because when you have lots of highly toxic waste that's moving through the GI tract, the water is the universal solvent. It's diluting down that toxic waste, especially if that waste is built up of a lot of animal products and highly acidic foods, because it's diluting down that waste with the water. Well, then when the water is eliminated, it's concentrating that waste, it's concentrating that ammonia, it's concentrating all that toxicity. Okay, so then that weakens the wall of the sigmoid and the anus and the rectum even further, making it harder on the body to eliminate at the last part of our GI tract. And the reason why that's very important to understand about the sigmoid is, again, going back to Dr. Jensen's teachings with iridology. And this will tie into the last part, and then it'll pretty much be all we have time for to talk about this time. And then we can always pick up and talk about it again sometime, or we can talk about another topic if you like, you know. But I go back to this because I talked about it in my presentation here, because I find it very, very fascinating. And it's very interesting how Dr. Jensen, he put all these things together, you know, and he talked about, I didn't mean to do it, maximize it. He talked about, let me move this out of the way where, there it goes. Okay. He talked about the 4 areas of the large intestine that are commonly seen in the people's eyes are the hepatic flexure, splenic flexure, the heart zone, and the sigmoid flexure of the sigmoid colon. Okay, that's what I explained here. The right hepatic, the left splenic, the descending colon, and then this is the bend, or the sigmoid colon bend. Okay, well, if you go back up here and you look, what is in that bend? The ovaries, the testes, the diaphragm, the spleen. Okay, what is it that when the spleen gets a weakness, you have anxiety, pensiveness, bad, you know, and that's what they've talked about many times. When you see a spleen weakness, you can see someone all day that's going to be a worry wart. They're going to be this hypochondriac about everything. And I actually knew a lady in our community several years ago. She kept talking to us and asking us questions, and she would always be worried about everything. She smoked cigarettes, like chain smoking. And I said to myself, I said, I bet if I look in her left eye, she's got a chronic spleen weakness. And then she finally did share her eyes with me, and I saved her eye. And of course, I didn't reveal the name, of course. But see, that's why I showed Dr. Jensen's chart. See, there is the sigmoid flexure in the chart. See, here's the splenic, the hepatic flexure in the right eye. Here's the splenic flexure in the left eye. Here's the sigmoid flexure that Dr. Jensen talks about. And see how it's right between the spleen and the ovary and testes, and right there in the diaphragm, upper abdomen? Well, look, I went down, and this is that lady. See, there's her huge spleen weakness. There is her, the red area the blue area is a chronic adrenal weakness. The yellow area is a chronic hypothalamus and pituitary weakness. Because I remember that in class, Marcy came over and I said, where can you see the hypothalamus in the the iridology chart. She said it's in the autonomic, I mean the animation lifeline in the very, very center of the transverse colon area. And that's what this is. That's the animation lifeline. And then over here, she has a chronic thyroid weakness. So see, all of those glands, that makes sense why that her pituitary is down is because her hypothalamus and her adrenals are down is because her hypothalamus and her pituitary is down. Her metabolism is down because of her thyroid and her parathyroid. And then on top of that, she's got a weak sigmoid, a spleen, and then also her ovaries. That's her ovaries right there beside it. And then look, there's her heart zone. She's got some issues going on her heart. So, and then that's heart zone, and all of these are the neural arch weaknesses that we were talking about earlier. That's what all of these areas are. And so that's why iridology is such an important tool, and how everything is connected. And that's what I like so much about this presentation and this book. And then to top it all off, when I gave this presentation, Dr. Jensen talked about how the emotions and the bowels, or the emotions affect the bowels. And he said right here, the colon is extremely sensitive and is influenced greatly by every emotion, both positive and negative. And a lot of people, we don't think about how positive emotions can overwhelm us too, and it makes us have fight or flight. It makes us lock up our colon where we can't release the waste, or we either have the opposite effect and we have severe diarrhea, so that's pretty much the bulk of what I wanted to talk about with you guys today. I appreciate you letting me just talk about it, because it's a definitely a topic that's really passionate to me, or I'm really passionate about. And one of my classmates, and because I know, Toni, you went to Dr. Morse's class in 2019, but when we went in 2018, Peely Chin, the lady that did a class, professor, in Dr. Morse's courses on the colon and the bowels, and she knows a lot about the subject too, and she's gave some great presentations and talks about it as well. And so, I find it very fascinating, and I love how you can take the teachings of Dr. Jensen and with the bowels and iridology, and you can mesh it with the teachings of Dr. Morse with lymphatic iridology and the understanding the lymph system, and understanding the spiritual and the emotional component, and how they all just work together, so that's what I like about talking about all these different subjects and just giving us food for thought and stuff to think about. Yeah.
And now, do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah, I do.
Oh,
As long as
okay,
you guys want
good.
to stay,
Yeah,
I
we
was
can go
I was
over
just
that
trying.
hour.
Well, I was just trying to respect the hour long.
I know, but sometimes we need a little bit more time. Because
Yeah,
you mentioned the food for thought, but now the food for our all healing. We
yeah,
always talk about it, how simple it can be, but people are struggling with so many issues. And I mean, now we know the whole GI tract it regulates everything. I wasn't even aware of how, with the fetus, how it grows, where it starts. I should have. I mean, been long enough on this earth, and I do have a child, so I should have known all that, but I did not. So thank you for pointing that out and starting with that, and actually make us aware of how extremely important it is.
yeah.
Now,
Oh,
there is one. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what I've touched on today, I could talk about it way more in detail for many more hours, because the reason why I say that is because just like in that presentation, like I'll just show one section as we're talking. I won't go into a whole long another spiel, but the reason why I wanted to go back to it just to show you how we ought to, talk about iridology in a whole presentation one day, and I can really break it down more, because at the very end, see, not only do I go over and show the different illustrations of how the high stress and the nervous system can be weakened and how we can see that, and of course, then I show all these photographs from Dr. Jensen's books. This is actually photographs that I copied from his book, and then it shows how the stress rings. That's the neurovascular cramp rings, or they call them stress rings. But anyways, at the very bottom, what I found very fascinating, that's why I want to share it, was how Dr. Jensen talked in his book about the brain flares and what they mean, and how one side is the physiological brain and the other side is the see, it's hard to pronounce those words. Physiological and psychological. There we go. I got it right then. And that's very interesting. And then he goes over each one and what they are. And what I found very fascinating was that just one example is that when a person has an ego pressure weakness in their head, that's in the same area as where one of the areas where you can see the hypothalamus. Because see right there, hypothalamus. Let me zoom in so you can see it. See, pituitary, hypothalamus, and cerebrum. Okay, blood pressure regulation. That's the normal function when there's not a major weakness there. Decision making, psychological stress reactions, willpower, stress response, anxiety, tension, sexual activity regulation. And then see the normal functions. See, it goes in, see, desire, power, assertiveness, domination, individuality, self-image, ego balance, ambition, leadership, independence, acquisitiveness, survival instincts, self-assurance. Okay. But abnormal, envy, inferiority, pride, and it goes out narcissism. So yes, you can see in the irises when they have a weakness in these areas, then they can have a tendency to show you why they behave and think and act the way they do. And I've already had it confirmed by other people that showed me the individual's eyes, and I seen the weakness that was in that area, and it correlated to the behaviors that they were acting. And so that's what's amazing is not only do we talk so much about iridology and how it helps us to know about the digestive system, the nervous system, the pancreas, the gallbladder, the adrenals, the lymphatic system, all these other areas. But the brain flares are showing you the inner states of the workings of the brain. And so it's like it takes seeing inside the eyes, like the windows to the soul, to a whole nother level, and so that's why I really find it very fascinating, because that's why I get so excited about iridology, is because I really think everyone should have an iridology reading done, and also from when they're a young age, so that they could track it from when they're a young age throughout their life, and just because it's a wonderful tool, it's a wonderful insight that we can see what's going on inside the brain, and inside the body, and stuff too, so that's just the one part that I wanted to mention. And so that's what I mean by I've just taken combinations of all these different books that I've read, about all these different topics. And I've just put them all together when I give these talks and presentations on these things, because I find how it's very interesting how they all work so serendipitously. They all weave together. But go ahead, Toni, again, what you were going to say.
Yeah, what you just showed, did that come from the volume 2 iridology book?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
volume two.
I do have it. It's a very thick book, and I
Yeah,
definitely have to dig in more.
yeah,
Now, what that actually means, I mean, we experience so many people with, the
that's
big
right.
egos, with narcissism, especially narcissism. But now it's like, hey, we can actually change that, because if that is a weakness, then it can be changed. How amazing is that?
Well, but there's one key. There's
Oh,
one key. They have to have the willingness to do the work necessary.
uh-huh. Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of
true.
times
And the
with certain,
narcissist usually doesn't want to do that, but
because you know why? They're too afraid to face their shame. They
uh-huh.
they
Yeah.
can't, because they would rather crawl up in a ball and deflect off that attention. They don't want to have accountability for their actions, so they would rather run away from their problems than have to face it. It's only those of us that are more, brave and willing, or more empathic, that can, and that's another reason why I resonated so much with Dr. Morse, is because I can feel how empathic he is, and I can see how empathic he is. And I've always been a very sensitive and empathic person myself too. And because anyone that gets that emotional over someone else's pain that they're going through, because a person that has a lack of empathy doesn't care two shits on what person's going through. They only care about themselves. And excuse my language, but that's true, because they're so self-absorbed, and so that's why some of these people, we can't truly help them because they don't want to help themselves, and that's
Yeah,
why.
but yeah, and I see. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, the last thing I was going to say, and then I'll let you go
Yeah,
ahead. And I think it's important for you women, especially, to understand, because you guys are so amazing at wanting to help us males and us men. And I have people all the time that come in the store and they're trying to help their husbands and their sons, but you can't always get them to do what you want them to do if they're not on board to do it. You have to get them excited about it to want to do it for themselves. You can help them with it some, but if they're just doing it to make you happy, it's not going to work. And I've seen that so many times, and it's sad. It really is, because we want to inspire these people to take control of it and help themselves, but sometimes they're only doing it just to appease other people.
yeah, but it's baby steps,
That's right.
There, even with baby steps, there can be improvement, and I think many
That's
of
right.
us have actually seen that.
That's
But I was going to refer a part of the health questionnaire that Dr. Morse developed and many of us are using. There
right. Mhm.
is one section where it is asking about inferiority, feeling inferior.
Mhm.
And so many people, I think 9 out of 10 people say yes to that.
Mhm.
So now I have a little bit more clarity to that part actually.
That's right.
It's interesting. There was another
Very
thing that I
interesting.
absolutely would love to get, even if it's short, insight from you, and that is enemas and colonoscopy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's
Colon. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's a good subject that we can talk about temporarily. I
yeah,
mean, just shortly, we won't have to make it a whole nother 30-minute conversation. Is that because Dr. Morris, we just had our community Zoom call with the Telegram group. It was on the 12th, so it was 2 days ago. And one of the people in there, they asked Dr. Morris what he thought about colonics and enemas. And see, Dr. Morse's old information that was in his original book, he talked about people could use it as a tool. He recommended people do the Hill tea more than just doing like water. And then, of course, he's always been a strong, what do you say, opponent, I guess, to coffee enemas because they're so acidic and they rob the colon of energy, because that's even what he said this the other day. He said, no coffee enemas, at the very end. And we were like, yeah. But what he said in his book that people need to take in consideration, and the reason why he's not really promoting that information today, is that what he's noticed from when he told that information in his book to now is that people have a tendency to abuse enemas and colonics too much. And that's the biggest thing, is he wants people to use more of the herbs, not just because he sells herbs, but because the herbs are restorative. They're helping the colon to work better. It's not just designed to flush out the waste. So, but I think, though, as long as someone does enemas the right way and does colonics the right way and doesn't abuse them, doesn't do them like every day, just does them periodically and does them with distilled water, and periodically does them with the herbs like Hill tea and stuff like that, then they can be a great tool because they can wash out mucus and sticky waste that you couldn't get out just on your own as easily. And also, especially if you're doing like liquid cleanses, like juice cleansing or water fasting, they can be really great during those times because you're not consuming fiber. You're not, even some people don't even consume the GI broom a lot when they're doing those cleanses. Now, when you're doing juice cleanses, you need to take the herbs and use the GI broom. That'd be a good time to do it. But sometimes when you're water fasting, you don't really do those things because people, when they water fast, they usually just drink water only. But so that's kind of the way I explain it to my clients when I talk to them about it, is that, you can experiment around with it and see how your body responds to it, because some people, their body responds really good to it and it really helps them to have more progress. But some people, it causes innervation again, just even with just distilled water. So I tell people to do a test. If you do an enema and it makes you feel more energy and you feel better, then that's a sign from your body that it was beneficial and that it wasn't too overwhelming to your nervous system and your colon. Because remember, again, your nervous system is very sensitive. And I've even noticed how even me irrigating my ear before with water to get earwax out, that it caused me to have a temporary issue of vertigo, and it stressed out my nervous system. Just that easy, because your nervous system is connected to everything. Well, same thing with your colon. If you try to be too aggressive with your colon with enemas or colonics, and your colon's not used to that water going up in there, then it can cause you some nervous system distress, and it can make you feel drained. It can make you feel really weak and tired. And it's the same thing even using a sauna or using cold plunges, or getting, like getting in a sauna and then getting into cold water. All of those things is because of how it can affect the nervous system. It can either affect it positively or it can affect it negatively, depending on how sensitive your body is to that tool, that method. So that's why I tell people, just do experiments, but when you do them, just do them in small amounts. Don't try to go too aggressive with your body when it's not used to it. Because it's kind of like riding the bicycle for the first time, or like you said earlier, baby steps. Just going easy with it. So that's kind of the way I look at it when I talk about with people about enemas and colonics and and all of those things. And I've even known of people using the Kalima board, like Dr. Morse was talking about, because back when he was starting in with his health food stores, all that was really popular back then, and that's what he talked about. On the 12th as well, he talked about that used to be really popular back when he had his health food stores and all of that. And then he got more into the herbs, and he didn't talk about and do the enemas with, or tell people about the enemas as much as he did with the herbs. So that's kind of the way I look at it all. Does that kind of answer some of your question, or
Absolutely. Yeah, we see people who cannot even have a bowel movement without doing an enema. And that's kind of scary because they said that not even the GI Broom or the GI Renew, we have a different name now, does help. So you get to a point is like, okay, how can we help these people?
Yeah. Well, what I've also noticed is that sometimes people are under so much stress, anxiety, worry, not only their own self, their own spirit having a human experience in their body, but also their environment. Because I'll give you an example. I had this one girl, she called me up. She lived somewhere that was it was like, it was close by Yugoslavia or somewhere, in the middle between Germany and Russia and all that area. And she was only in her mid 20s. She was living with her parents, and her parents didn't believe in any of this natural approach. And she was really skinny, really petite girl, and she was in her, like I said, early 20s. And she was living in an area where they had lots of high levels of air pollution, she said. And she was under so much stress. She was doing 100% fruit, and she was taking Dr. Morse's GI number 5. And she said she still couldn't go to the bathroom. And I said that was because you're under so much stress. As your bowels are locked up, and they're not going to literally let go until you let go, until you surrender, until you get out of that negative environment with your parents and get out of that negative area with the high pollution. And she told me back, she was like, well, Thad, I feel trapped. I don't know how I can get away. And I'm like, well, I know I can sympathize, because a lot of people feel that way, because maybe their job, their family, where they live, I mean, that was like we all felt really bad for these couple of ladies that talked with us on, on the 12th that lived in Canada, and they were talking about how hard it was for them to get even fresh fruit, because they said all the fruit that is imported up there, it's irradiated and it's very expensive, and and it's cold up there more times than it's a warmer temperature. It's kind of like Alaska. And we were just like, I even told them, I spoke up one of the moments and I said, well, I would look for any kind of local growing stuff, like stuff that grows during the temperate climates, like wild berries or local fruits that grow in your local area. And she said, we're able to find some of that, but not enough, when we're really trying to do the full fruit detoxing, and she said it's just hard. And so they said a lot of the stuff they're having to resort to using is the pasteurized juices that are organic that they're getting from the store that are and then also Dr. Morse even said, and we also some of us others people talked about too, dehydrated fruit, because you can always get that shipped into you, especially if you get good quality and stuff, so that brings up another great topic that we talk about with people during this time of year is what to do when it's cold and you can't always get good quality fruit, and what to do when to keep yourself more warm, and stuff. So those are always topics we talk about during this time of year, in the temperate climates, that is.
Well, it's cold in Florida too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a little chilly up here lately too.
But not compared to elsewhere. Well, I come from the Netherlands too, and
Yeah.
I felt we always had there were always apples and pears, and what was imported in were the bananas and the oranges, and of course we had the berries from fall even to winter season. And I know people in Canada who do very well on just the fruit with whatever they can get. There is
Yeah.
another thing that I would like to point out is that you can get frozen fruit, and actually the frozen fruit is picked ripe because
Yeah, and you
otherwise
can.
it would have zero taste. And
That's right.
they are frozen right after harvest, so there is not a long distance as in where it needs to go from Mexico to who knows where.
Hmm.
And so the frozen fruits, they are pretty. I see them as second best. And what you said, you have the dehydrated fruit that you need to rehydrate. So there are options, and that is what I've been using. I have the frozen fruit, I have the fresh fruit, I make my juices. We can still get watermelon, not so much in Canada, I presume, but there are ways, and worrying about what you can't get is not helping anyone.
That's right.
So it is, we do our best with what we can get, and we try to see it positive and be grateful for anything that is out there. And absolutely, through farmers markets, I connected with people and visited even their farm and see what they have. And right now, there is an abundance of passion fruit, which I love to add to a smoothie, and I just buy what they have, like Saturday morning, early farmers market. They have about 40 passion fruits, and I just freeze them.
Yeah.
You can keep
There's
them about 2 weeks in the fridge, but then you really need to freeze them. But and we do what we can.
That's right. There should still be like pomegranates around, and there should be still some citrus. Because I even asked Dr. Morse that. I said, is Florida doing a little bit better with their citrus since they've been having problems with that citrus blight in the last couple of years? And he said, yeah, it's hard for us to even find good citrus anymore down here. And
Absolutely. And there is all the citrus that I can get here comes from California.
yeah,
And
sad.
I live in the middle of the citrus groves, it's citrus groves
Yeah.
everywhere
Well,
around us. There's a big factory here actually with the well-known name, and that is where all the citrus grown in Florida goes to.
oh, really? Wow.
Produces,
Yeah.
yeah.
I've also noticed living in Central Alabama for so long, and I've I've even bought produce before from a bulk produce distributor when of course things weren't so inflated like they've gotten in the last couple of years, and I could afford, to order in bulk from them because you have to order such a large amount. And then also I'd get a two or three friends to go in with me. But a lot of the citrus that comes from Florida, it's more towards the end of the citrus season. The earlier citrus that comes more in like November, December, that's coming from California. And then a lot of the citrus comes from Florida, or at least up to where we're at, more in like January and February. That's been our experience up here in central Alabama.
Yeah, what we see here, Elena mentions that she moved to Belize mostly for the food, but in saying that, Canada, all the food is crap. I can assure you, if I go here to the grocery stores, it doesn't matter if it's the berries or whatever it is, it tastes like crap.
I
It
know it's
really
sad.
does. I am
It is.
lucky if I have a good tasting watermelon. But I start growing my own mangoes
That's
and
yeah,
they
that's
are
what I was
absolutely
that's
delicious.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's a lot of stuff we can grow ourselves. And another thing I was going to tell people when they're in these places like Canada and stuff is that, I know cucumber is still technically like a veggie fruit that we call it, but it's still a melon and it's still very alkaline and it's still very water rich. And a lot of your cucumbers are grown year round in Canada and different places in the greenhouses, in hot houses. They say it where they grow a lot of their tomatoes and stuff like that, because that's where when I go shopping to Costco and Sam's, that's where I see those English cucumbers that are grown, up there in those places, and they're available down here year round, and they're organic, and then also, I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but we were even talking about it recently. Is that you know thanks to Mr. Billy, Billy Gates, they've come out with that appeal. Y'all probably heard about it before that they're treating with some of our fruits and vegetables, and so we have to watch out. And there's certain stores that are selling them, of course, like Walmart and Target and those kind of stores like that. But some of your stores, of course, some of your more, natural grocery stores and stuff are refusing to sell them. But also they're labeled properly, but some of them, they put a sticker over it that says organic, and then you can peel the sticker off and you can see that it says appeal,
Oh
and
my gosh.
yeah,
Oh
you hadn't
no.
heard about that yet, Tony?
Yeah, I know. I really dug into that, and it's
Yeah,
been
it's
discussed
sad.
in the groups
Sad.
too.
Yeah.
And there is actually a lady, and she comes from medical medium, but
Yeah.
she had an amazing article about what it really is and what it really does. And I would have to find it and tell
Bunch
you
of
because
chemicals, trans fats, and bunch of
oh
just
yeah,
nasty,
it's like
nasty
you
stuff.
don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. And you
But
can't you can't even peel it off the food. I mean, you
no,
can peel all the
it's
skin
in
off,
the
but it's
food.
soaked in. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
soaked in.
I wasn't aware that they put like the organic sticker over. It's good to
Yeah, I
know.
seen
But
a video.
yeah,
Yeah, I seen a
lately
video
they
somebody shared that they bought it from one of those stores, and they seen that there was a sticker over the that said
right.
organic. They peeled it off and it said appeal.
Well, legally they don't even have to put that appeal sticker on it,
Oh, really?
so
I
people
thought they
don't
had to
even.
label it.
No, no, not in
Oh,
every state or every country.
sad. That's sad.
It is pretty sad, but
Yeah.
I bought oranges that had stuff, they were organic and they had stuff on it, and I was like, that came from crickets, I think. And I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I
But
know. That's
now we are at an hour and a half. I do have to go.
okay. Yeah.
I would love to do the iridology thing. Like maybe I don't know if you are available. It would be the last podcast this year, because that is the 100th podcast, and
Yeah.
I want to do something special.
Just let me know at least 3 or 4 days in advance if you
Right?
can, or at least a couple days
Yeah.
in advance, and then I can plan for it, and then I'll be happy to talk again because this is a
Yeah,
good
and
time.
maybe because you said you have so much to share, you need to do a
Yeah.
part one, part two, part three, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so that we can get the information out, and the more the better, Both Thad and I do iridology readings, so whoever is interested, that's information is at the bottom of the description underneath the video, so you can connect with him. I didn't forget you, Sarah. Did you have any questions or comments?
Well, no, I really enjoyed this show. I'm actually, I usually don't go back and listen to our own shows, but there's definitely so much information in there that I will do that for this one. But I wanted to also say too, there is an old farmer. I think he's probably maybe in his 80s, but he lives in Oklahoma and he grows oranges. So if you just jump on YouTube and search growing oranges in Oklahoma, I believe he grows them all year round, and he has a
Wow.
pretty extensive greenhouse where I think it's connected to his home, and he dug only like 4 feet down, and then it's kind of like not a tunnel, but it's like the shape of a tunnel, but the top still comes off the ground, and so he takes advantage, I guess, of the geothermal, and he's able to grow oranges all year round.
Well,
So,
what we actually can grow certain types of mandarins here in a central part of Alabama, and we have to grow them in a greenhouse, and we can grow them in
yep,
the ground. But
yep.
they have to be grafted onto a rootstock from a wild variety that grows in our woods.
Okay.
It's a wild lemon that's called flying dragon, and then when they graft the certain trees onto that rootstock, it makes them where they're dwarf. And so they only get like 6 feet tall. And there's this guy in Central Alabama. They have a whole nursery where they sell all the plants, and they even show you how they do it and everything. And they said there's only a couple times that it gets cold enough in Alabama where they actually have to heat it just a little bit. But the rest of the time, they keep the plastic down on the sides, and then it protects them and it keeps them alive. But yeah, they grow mandarins, they grow kumquats and satsumas. Well, satsumas are like mandarins too. And then they grow one type of navel orange called Washington navel, and then they grow a small type of grapefruit, even. So, and then they have like key limes and different, types of limes they have too, even the finger limes. I don't know if y'all have ever seen the videos from Miami Fruit, the limes that are,
Hmm.
look like, they call them finger limes, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I have personally been up in Sleepy Hollow, New York, and they're like those greenhouses that are above ground, but they're those beautiful like atriums. You kind of see them more in
Yeah.
France and England. And they've had lemon trees and even orange trees that are very old in those. And they would just heat them with wood, I guess, throughout the winter time. And this was in New York. So the possibilities are endless. We just, depending on where we live, we have to do what we have to do. But that was
That's
all I
right.
had to say. And thank you so much today for this information. I'm on board with part one, part two, also on this, and hearing
Yeah.
more about the GI. It is so important. And the part about gravity, I really liked that. I'm definitely going to go back and listen to that. But yes, so I guess our 100th show is not next Thursday, but the following Thursday. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds
Oh,
like a great idea because I'm getting more geared up to get more active again and do more things in the upcoming year because, I've just had a really challenging year this year. And so I'm getting more back into everything, getting more back into detox and everything. So I'm looking forward to doing more of these kind of things, even in my own group, as well as teaming up with other people in our community too.
yeah,
So
thank
thank you
you.
again, Tony, for the opportunity. And it's always nice talking to you too. What's your first name again?
It's Sarah.
Sarah,. That's right. I just keep forgetting.
No
Uh,
problem.
but, but yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. It's nice talking with y'all, and we'll let you go, Tony. And yeah, just let me know in advance, and we'll set it up again, and we'll give everyone a more of a notice, and then maybe more people will show up again.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Sarah, and especially that this time for being here and being so informative. We always keep learning. So I would say love to you all and thanks, Ian. Till the next time. Bye bye.